Okay, we're starting part 2 about the Karpman drama triangle. Not necessarily acupuncture Chinese medicine related, but I feel like it's so helpful and very important for the healing process and for just developing like happy, healthy relationships in your life. So this is part 2. So this is about how do we get out of it. Okay, so first we must find for ourselves and others. So I kind of like to think that whatever degree of negativity that there is in a situation, it's going to take a equal and opposite dose of quote unquote positivity in a situation. So I don't believe that there are good or bad emotions, but I do think that there are health promoting mindsets and harm promoting mindset. So we need to, whatever amount of degree there is like a destructive, harmful mindset in a situation, we need to create an equal and opposite healthy mindset. So we create this healthy mindset through compassion, empathy, releasing judgment, empowerment, empowering others and empowering ourselves, integrity, and vision, which often goes with kind of our soul purpose. So this is how we cut the drama, and I'm going to do it from each of the different perspectives on the drama triangle and just talk about my insights. So this is, if you find yourself in a victim role, how you can cut the drama is one, very most important first step is protect and prioritize yourself. So you need to accurately assess if this is kind of a one-time situation with this person, and also how much it is negatively impacting you. So, a sometimes annoying coworker is not going to be the same level as like an abusive parent or an abusive spouse, or somebody that's even physically abusing yourself. So first and foremost is to assess the situation, figure out what's needed to protect and prioritize yourself, and then enact whatever is most necessary. Obviously that's much easier said than done. I could probably do a whole nother video just on that topic. I'm not trying to overly simplify this. I'm just saying that it can be very hard to get out of the drama triangle if you're still being physically, mentally, emotionally impacted by the people in the scenario. So it's much harder to find compassion and empathy for people when they're actively kind of messing with your life or finances or what have you. It's like you're going to be feeling some sort of way if you're in a situation where people are continuing to behave negatively towards you. That's just normal. That's your emotions giving you guidance that you're not in a good situation. So first and foremost, remove yourself from a situation, shift up dynamics, figure out how much and to what degree it's negatively impacting you. So the second thing is you need to take accountability for your own actions, mental state, and feelings. And this can be so hard, but every single person watching this video, to an extent, needs to realize that if you look around your life and you look at everything in your life, you got yourself there. You walked there with your own 2 feet. If there are situations in your life that you don't like, aren't pleasant, you played a role in that. So, I don't necessarily mean this for maybe kids or teenagers or people that are, under 18, but if you're a grown-up and you don't like your spouse, well, you married them. If you're a grown-up and you don't like your job, well, you continue going to your job. If you feel like your schedule is packed full, then unpack your schedule. Nobody else is going to come in on a white horse and save you. You're the person that needs to decide for yourself what you want in your life and what it's going to take to get that. So then recognize the power that you're giving the perpetrator and find an alternate route. So sometimes people feel victimized because they have this like perceived perception of the perpetrator having this power that they don't. like they're kind of holding the keys to the castle in whatever ways. Like this could be, a wife that feels like she's financially dependent upon her husband, any sort of dependency, or maybe even emotionally dependent. Like, who am I without this person? I wouldn't be able to live or last or, whatever. And then you need to figure out a way to kind of meet those needs for yourself. So if you're financially dependent on somebody, figure out a way that you can become unfinancially dependent on somebody. Basically, kind of the antidote to victimhood is self-empowerment and independence, and figuring out ways that you can rely on yourself. So I would also say, find compassion for yourself and for the other person, because this will also cut emotional reactivity. I would say too, just don't take things so personal with that person. Conflict and heavy emotions are just kind of a part of life. So then rewriting the narrative. So you go back in time and you're not necessarily looking at events from the perspective of like, oh, this person caused so much harm. You can actually rewrite the narrative to see how that person benefited you. Like one example for me, hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I do have a certain family member that's constantly picked on me throughout my whole life and always felt criticized anything that I wanted to do in my dreams. And I could easily have been victimized by that, but instead I chose to kind of be like, well, I'm gonna just that actually motivates me to do better. That motivates me to prove that person wrong. So it's I think about that person in my life, and I honestly don't know if I would be as successful as I am without that person constantly picking on me. So that's an example of a way that you can kind of rewrite the narrative. And then last is self-care, caring for yourself. Okay, how to cut drama with perpetrators continued. Recognize that their bad behavior is a survival strategy, so they are trying to survive. And that's what humans have been doing for aeons. Not always super skillfully, but we have survived and we have gone through life in part because of these strategies. So you kind of release some of the emotional activation around people acting the same way when you have more understanding and compassion that it is a survival strategy. And perpetrators often believe that the alternate is being a victim. So they live in a black and white reality where if they don't harm others first, they will be harmed. So recognize that that's really not a great mentality to be in. They're often not very happy people. They often, can struggle a lot in their relationships and just not be super happy. So in a way you can kind of feel sorry for them, and that cuts a little bit the drama or the need to take things so personal or internalize other people's behavior. They probably have messed up beliefs in part because of their own life experiences. So they probably at one point were victims themselves, which created this kind of dog-eat-dog mentality. And there's a certain power to attacking and blaming others. There are short-term payoffs. For example, the victims, while they're trying not to harm others, they tend to internalize the negativity, and that can kind of create this sort of I'm almost thinking all of a sudden this just popped into my head. In Ayurveda, the different elements of Kapha, Pitta, Vata, I almost feel like it could be connected to the Karman triangle, because I want to say, so Kapha is earth and water in Ayurveda, and it's very heavy and dense, and that is kind of the way that I think of the victim. It's almost like all this energy just goes inward and gets very stagnant. So the benefit to the perpetrator, if you think of that as more maybe Pitta, which is fire, it's that it's moving. There's a lot of energy there. So they're not necessarily getting stuck. They might be stuck psychologically in some ways, or, maybe even better word would be stunted psychologically, but they can be very productive individuals, like anger is a motivating force. Even rage is a more motivating force. People can accomplish a lot on that kind of energy. So in a way, reading about the Karpman Triangle gave me some sort of compassion for perpetrators, because they're attempting to avoid just getting that like stuck, sunken, disempowered sense that you would feel as a victim. They're trying in a way to empower themselves when they've maybe experienced some really difficult things. So, and then last but not least, you can understand them and you can have compassion for them, but that also does not justify bad behavior. That does not mean that it is okay to treat other people aggressively. So keeping that within the context of our understanding of other people. So then cutting the drama between rescuer to the victim. So recognize that each person has their own struggles and journey, and don't take somebody else's struggles away from them. So an example that I use is a butterfly, or like snakes or birds. That stage of like struggle when they're trying to break out of the egg or break out of the pupa, that's actually a really important stage in nature. And sometimes, like for example, I think it's with birds or goslings, I'm not sure, but they say that you shouldn't try and like help a creature, get out of an egg, because they actually need that struggle in order to like that's their first obstacle that they have to overcome in life. So metaphorically, why I use this is that people need struggle, and I see this sometimes with parents and kids, and I feel like it's very detrimental, where parents, maybe due to like they're being well-intentioned or maybe they're impatient, try and immediately step in and do something for a kid. Like a kid is trying to tie their shoes and the parent's like, here, let me do that for you. Because they're rescuers, they need to be needed. Maybe they want to keep, on some level psychologically, they want to keep that kid in kind of an infantile place. So toxic. I've definitely seen parent and children, even with adult children, that you can tell that they don't want their kid to ever grow up because they want to be needed. They want to be mommy forever. Super toxic, super unhealthy. So I think that, if you do have kids and you see them struggling with something, let them struggle. There is a threshold. I forget which psychologist it is, but we talked about it in one of my psychology classes, and it really, it was talking about the growth edge, and it really, I thought it was very insightful. So there's this area of growth where something is hard and we're struggling. If something feels impossible, then we're no longer growing, because a likely result of that sense of something being impossible is that we're just going to give up, or we're just going to get super duper angry and annoyed. So, and it's also like a very important skill to learn how to manage frustration, because things are not always going to go our way, and we are going to have obstacles, and we're going to need to have that sense of fortitude and grit in a way if we want to succeed in any sort of realm of our life. So it's really important to allow other people to struggle and not try to take the struggle away from them. That, can just also point to a lack of boundaries where we are being overly empathetic to the person. There's definitely people that very, very high on the empathy level, empathy scale, and they're very well intentioned, but part of their motivation for trying to help others is because they don't want to feel uncomfortable when other people are struggling. They themselves don't want to be in the room with somebody that's sad, because that's so uncomfortable. They're going to take on that emotion, and it's not actually that healthy ultimately for yourself or for other people. Like, other people need to be provided the space to struggle and have their own feelings that are negative. So Also, cutting the drama between rescuer and victim is finding humility and realizing that we are not masters of the universe. So, I definitely see this in my private practice where people come in and they have an issue and they expect me to fix it. And obviously that's, somewhat reasonable when they're coming in, paying money, spending time and energy in my clinic. However, something that I've realized over so many years of doing this is that ultimately it is not my responsibility to fix people. It is my responsibility to use my knowledge and expertise and clinical skills to the best of my ability. It is my responsibility to show up and be present and be kind to that person, but it is not my responsibility to fix them, because ultimately I don't have that power, and nobody has that power to fix somebody else. And sometimes people don't get better, and it could be that there's something there that they need to learn, I'm not a huge proponent of that the universe is like a master class that's trying to teach you lessons. I don't really ascribe to that. I think that the universe is a little bit more neutral, and we have the choice of whether or not we're going to grow and learn within that sphere. However, if you keep running into a wall over and over and over again, it's just I'm talking more like action consequence. If you keep running into a wall, your head is going to hurt. And if you keep doing these certain things in your life that are harmful, you are going to experience pain and suffering. So in a way, it's you don't take the consequence of somebody else's choices away from them. So people can come into acupuncture, very frequently and kind of become like a frequent flyer and want to come in every week to be fixed. And that's great, and it will help them. And if people are going home and doing detrimental things at the end of that, then it might not necessarily be as helpful as it would be otherwise. So yeah, finding humility, and then taking stock of your own capacity and issues. I wrote issues, but I think I meant capacity. Taking stock of your life situation, of what can you actually give that feels like you're giving from an overflowing cup and not giving to your detriment. Okay, so rescuer to victim continued. Self-care, again, I put that in the victim one. Giving people credit. So people are more resilient than you think that they are. They can figure it out. And sometimes I've had patients that I can tell that they kind of want to be a little victim-y with me, and they'll be texting me or emailing me this thing's going on, blah blah blah. And if I feel like they're trying to put me into that unhealthy rescuer role, or that they're trying to kind of just dump on me in a way that's outside of the session, I will respond sometimes with just I trust that you can figure this out. And to me, I really do feel like that is the most compassionate response in that case. And a huge thing that we don't realize, or that I didn't realize initially in my practice, but now I do, is that, part of my role is not necessarily to heal somebody, but to help them to have access to their own inner resources that are already present. So I truly believe that everybody has, their own intuition, their own life path, their own inner healer. So if I can help somebody access their inner healer, then, ultimately they're not going to need me. But still, you should get acupuncture. It's great. But, I don't want people to necessarily always be dependent on me. I want them to be able to access their own inner healer. And then you also, I think, as well as people having their own inner healer, there's just a divine intelligence. There's a, not necessarily plan, but there's a blueprint that goes beyond our comprehension. And so if we can kind of release a little bit of that need to control and pick things apart, I think that can be super healthy and helpful for other people. Okay, so perpetrators to the victim. I will say, we use the term perpetrator and it sounds very harsh. Like, it sounds like, oh, this is somebody that would spend time in jail, or, you know, like something like that. But I don't, like, anybody can be a perpetrator. I've been a perpetrator of drama in my life, certainly. Anytime that we're coming at somebody with an edge, aggressively, with judgment and criticism, not from a place of love and compassion, we are perpetrating drama. So we're instigating. So maybe I should have renamed it like the instigator. But anyway, so we've all been in this role. I've been in this role. This is what it's been very helpful for me to learn to do. One, pause before responding. So don't respond if you're dysregulated. Like, if you're really pissed off, just don't send that text. Don't send that email. Wait, give it a beat before you send something in a very emotionally dysregulated state, because 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, like, it might feel really good in that moment, but it's not actually going to be helpful. It's not going to get you to your goals. Ultimately, it's just gonna create drama. So, growing your tolerance for differences. So other people are going to see the universe in a different way. Other people are going to operate in the universe in a different way. I'm not talking about tolerating hate or something that you truly view as destructive or harmful. You know, if you see someone kicking a dog, by all means, confront them. I think that that's a healthy form of the perpetrator. But kind of what I'm talking about is just when somebody like lives a different life than you, like people, for example, that want to hate on gay people or trans people, and it's like, well, it's not really affecting you that much. I know that there is a narrative that it is affecting people, but personally, I don't ascribe to that. I mean, I'm trying not to get too like political on this channel, but you know, it's like, just live and let live. Like, if it doesn't personally impact you, like, it's not changing your day. You don't have to change your route to work. Okay, you don't have to change your hours that you're working. You don't get like a pay cut. Like, it's not affecting you, then don't worry about it. Just let other people live their life. So then, seeking to understand instead of criticize and or teach people a lesson. So sometimes somebody wrongs us, we want to like get back at them. There's an instinct to be vindictive or teach someone a lesson. And instead, you know, if you can approach it with trying to understand, well, why did they do that? Why are they feeling that way? That's a good way to cut drama. Getting curious is honestly like a game changer. Like, when I'm activated or when I'm in kind of a more tense discussion with somebody, I will actually pause and ask myself, am I still curious? And if I'm not, that's probably a good sign that I'm in the drama triangle. Because if you can't stay curious, then basically what's happening is that you're getting into, I'm right and this person is wrong. And that's when you get into that realm of being like the perpetrator. And then finding self-regulation. And this is probably the most challenging of all on this list, because there literally is a physiological component to this. If somebody's had a lot of drama in their life, a lot of trauma in their life, you know, it's going to be much harder for them to stay present in the moment, to see when they're getting upset. You know, I remember at one point, I started noticing that a precursor to me getting mad at somebody was a tight feeling in my stomach. And that was something that I didn't even realize until, you know, my early 30s. That like, when I start getting that sensation of like, ooh, like that like tension inside, I'm like, okay, something's happening in the interaction, in the conversation. And that's a cue that I need to, you know, do a little bit of a U-turn in the conversation, whether it's like, okay, maybe let's just don't talk about this for a little bit so that I can go process it before responding, or just changing the subject or whatever, or, you know, getting curious of being like, hey, you said this thing and I'm not quite sure where you were coming from with that. Can you expand? You know, versus like just kind of making assumptions. And then, avoiding getting into the victim mentality yourself, because perpetrators often start as victims. So now we're doing rescuers to perpetrators. So while rescuers will often try to rescue a victim, they can also attempt to rescue a perpetrator. So this is like a rescuer that's attempting to shift somebody else's like bad behavior in a way. So you could see this as somebody's very angry, they have maybe a vendetta against a specific type of person or something, and the rescuer wants to like help them work through that. I think of one example. I was reading this book. It was a romance book. There were good parts to the book, but I did not really care for the interaction between the two main characters because the male in the story was often, in a way, just kind of a perpetrator, like very angry and aggressive, and the female in the story was the classic rescuer. And there's this scene where the male love interest is feeling frustrated about something, so he picks up the cat. And I mean, this is just literary, so not real life, but in the story, the male main love interest picks up a cat and chucks the cat across the room. And the female's internal dialogue about this is, oh, he's just like so wounded, he's so hurting, like I have to go help him, like, oh, look at his, oh, poor thing, he's just like so confused inside, you know. So it's like rescuers definitely can try to rescue perpetrators just as much as victims, and usually there's a little bit more of a delusional quality with rescuers trying to shift perpetrators. It could be like, a woman being drawn to the bad boy, or I don't know, somebody has a ideology that's causing them pain, like they are against a certain sect of people or whatever, and a rescuer is going to rush into the day and try and change their perspective. And we all know how well that works in our current cultural climate, right? Changing people's opinions, super easy. So that's how the rescuer tries to rescue the perpetrator. Personally, if I saw somebody throw a cat, I don't think that I would want to date them, but that's just me. Okay, so how do we cut the drama? So one, recognizing that no matter a person's history, background, difficult things that they've been through, maybe it even could be they have a chemical imbalance, they have a mental health issue, they have a personality disorder. Be that as it may, there is still the irrefutable truth that for every action, there is a concurrent reaction. So that's just a law of the universe. Every action has an equal and opposite consequence, basically, to it. So first thing is recognizing that no matter a person's history, they're still responsible for their behavior. At the end of the day, each one of us is responsible for our behavior. I had one patient come into my clinic, and she was basically telling me, like, hey, due to my trauma, sometimes I will yell at my providers and I can't help it because it's just a trauma response that I have. To which I basically responded, like, I'm sorry, I can't help you, because I expect a certain behavior within my clinic to keep it a safe space, not only for myself, but for other patients, because I would hate for one patient to walk in on another patient being very dysregulated, emotionally dysregulated, and then feel like they can't have this as a safe space when they are following the rules and that other patient is willing to make it a safe space. So for me, I basically said, I'm sorry, but these are the rules to my clinic. Like, if somebody's behaving in a certain aggressive, unruly way, I'm not going to work with them. So I did end up firing her as a patient because I was just like, I'm sorry, but you have to behave in a certain way if you're going to be in the clinic. So so then rescuers to perpetrator, cutting the drama as well. So don't try to save other people from the consequences of their own behavior. I think that sometimes rescuers absolutely will do this. And I'm trying to think, a good example would be if somebody's in a relationship and they keep asking their partner to do something, or it could be to not do something that is really detrimental to the relationship, but that person makes the choice, the conscious decision to keep doing that. It could be like, hey, when we have fights, I'm not comfortable with yelling, or, just more obvious things like, don't give people your phone number, don't ask other people out, don't cheat on me, whatever. But I have seen in some relationships that then the relationship ends and the first person is kind of riddled with guilt, and they feel like they should give that person a second chance or a second pass, when from my perspective, like, they made their choice. They knew that the expectation was this and they chose to behave in that way. So, life has certain natural consequences. The same thing could go for like a job or what have you, that there just are consequences for your own behavior. And if you try to save people from the consequences of their own behavior, then you're gypping them a learning opportunity, because sometimes people don't learn without pain. It just is unfortunate that it's like that way. But there are some people that learn because somebody else tells them, hey, don't do this, don't touch the stove, it's hot. Some people have the learning style that they will be like, okay, I'm not going to do that, it's hot. Somebody I trust told me I'm not going to touch it. But unfortunately, just other people, sometimes people just have to figure it out for themselves. They have to touch the stove and burn their hand to realize, oh, geez, maybe I shouldn't touch the stove. So, in a way, this also is like a way that people learn how to treat other people. Like if there's natural consequences, like somebody doesn't want to be in a relationship with you, or you lose a job because you're not showing up in a relationally respectful way, that's just like a natural consequence. So for every action, there's reaction. We kind of went into that. People have to choose to get or do better. This is so important. You cannot make somebody change. They 100% have to change. People can be so stuck in their suffering for their entire lives, literally until the day that they die, and that's just their choice. And some people are going to do that, and we just have to have the humility to realize that we really only have control over ourselves, and focus on the things that we can control, which is how we grow, how we behave, our thoughts and feelings that we have about the world. Okay. So then rescuers to perpetrators continued. It's really important to not compromise your relationship to yourself. I've been in situations where I overextended myself because I had the feeling like, this person won't be able to cope if I don't do X. But then what ends up happening is that when I'm prioritizing somebody else over myself, it actually negatively impacts my own self-esteem, or, for anybody that does this. So it's really important, I think, to have your relationship with yourself be number one. It doesn't make you selfish. It actually opens up your energy so that you can be more helpful to other people. Next one, hold others accountable. This is so important because, it really comes to you have to know what your expectations are in a relationship, and kind of like the laws, like the law of the land, if that makes sense, because this is really going to help you when somebody wants to kind of violate your boundary in a way. Discern based on the present, not an imagined future. So basically, we can't be too caught up in somebody's potential. Like at the end of the day, we have to look at how somebody is behaving and judge them based on that. And then recognize that perpetrators, if they want to be in that role, they need victims to be perpetrators. So you might be their next one if you are trying to rescue somebody. So look at the way that people treat other people and assume that you might be the recipient of that, if you're in that situation. Okay, so then perpetrators to victims. Oh, maybe I I skipped through a little bit. That's okay. So this is backtracking a little bit because apparently my slides were out of order, but I'm just gonna roll with it. So getting clear on true motivation / like desires from the exchange. So this kind of will cut the emotional reactivity. We don't necessarily want to be engaging with people from an emotionally reactive place. You want to actually think about what your goals are. And the goal could be connection, the goal could be setting a boundary, the goal could be working on a project with somebody. So really keeping in mind more long-term goals and recognizing that when we get into those like judgy, critical, emotionally reactive mindsets, it actually is like a huge withdrawal from the relational saving account in a way. Relationships in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that book is great, and they talk about the relational savings account or checking account, whatever, the account where it's like every time you do something positive for that person or you get this connection, it's like a deposit, and then anytime that there's this like negative conflict or criticism, that's a withdrawal. So you want to keep your relational bank accounts in the positive, so really trying to discern if something is really worth it before bringing an issue to light. And then asking yourself a couple questions. Are you trying to control, dominate, or manipulate, or intimidate the other person? And then are you trying to elicit an emotional response from the other person? And then is there an alternate and more direct way of asking for what you want?